Hello, everyone here in the room. We're still going to give it a couple of minutes. We were let out a little bit late from the last session, and people are enjoying some coffee. Speaking the mic for the people online, so I know you guys in here understand what's happening. So we're just going to give it a couple more minutes, get more people in the room, and then get started. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good morning here in the room. We have some people connected online as well. So thank you for your patience. Some of us in here, like I mentioned earlier, had a really interesting session earlier. It went over a little bit. We then had some coffee. We were mingling, doing like the best thing about these sessions, which is really talking to each other, trying to learn from each other, seeing what kind of learning has happened. So we got into the room a little bit late, but we're gonna get ourselves started. So today's session, we really want it to be something that is informal. We also understand a lot of the other sessions this week have gone over a little bit in terms of the presenters. We all are very excited to share. So some of these presentations were over, which reduced the time we had for Q&A, reduce the time we had for really collaboration, being able to talk to each other with mics and all, right? So we want this to be very informal. That's why I'm wearing my sneakers today. We want all of you guys to participate. We have Hallie, who's gonna really help us out today. She was telling me she hasn't had enough coffee, so if we have her run around the room, it'll help her stay awake. Thank you for that. And so we will have two people up here with me. So I think you guys have already heard Dr. Michael Okoroff. He was one of the openers. So if I can invite you to come up here and grab one of the mics. Thank you. And then we also have Herman Brower, who will be joining us up here talking a little bit about his experience as a senior advisor at multi-stakeholder collaboration for food, agriculture, and nature at Wegnan University. So discussing with him on day one, he seems to have a really nice perspective of how we can all, from the public sector, from the private sector, and academia, try to collaborate, try to find those synergies, as we were just talking about downstairs, to really find a way forward and hopefully get some of the learnings that happened this week and start applying them. I know people have been sharing business cards, emails. So trying to find a way forward is going to be the discussion for today. So I hope everyone is feeling energized and willing to share today and ask some questions. But to start us off, we thought it would be great if we could start with a question on what actions, requests, and needs do you guys think emerge from the conversations, and who are the key audience / stakeholders who need to act? So basically, we're doing another of the exercises we did yesterday, a little bit of what we all heard. We were all in different tracks. We all were in different side chats and conversations over coffee. So a little bit, maybe Herman, we can start with you. Tell us a little bit of what you heard that really was impactful and you'll remember, and we'll maybe take back.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I've just been put on the spot, so I'm just improvising, like many of us are.
Professor.
Being optimally unprepared. That's, I think, the sweet spot where we all hope to be, right? So yeah, I've been listening a lot, and I arrived at the point that you often have in conferences and meetings like this, where the confusion that was there in my head yesterday seems to have lifted a little bit, and I can see some interesting perspectives, opportunities, and also actions as I get to know this community. Because, as you already mentioned in your introduction, I'm from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. I've never before engaged with this community, even though my university is doing quite a bit of work on resilience, particularly in the agriculture and food space. So the couple of things from this morning session that were inspiring for me in our small group work was really around the importance of any resilience evidence kind of effort to really be inclusive and work in a co-creation process. I think a lot of people said that in very, very different words. And at the same time, we realized that, well, if you do this, you probably end up with a very diverse, rich, and pluralistic set of data, evidence, and voices. So process-wise, that's really good. That's what you want. But aggregation-wise, it might actually be a real challenge. So how do you reconcile that? Now, I see some of the faces that are here in this room who have a lot of insight on that. So maybe I should just point it out rather than just try to give an answer myself, because I'd love to hear from you guys also what your perspectives are on how you can deal with that tension of, on the one hand, create a co-creation process with different types of stakeholders, and at the same time also find ways to aggregate that without having to end up with, a metric like, the resilience is 7 or something. That's meaningless, of course. We also have heard a lot about the need for contextualization, because what is resilient in one community or for one group of actors in one situation may be very different from another situation. Maybe a second last point that came up this morning that I really kind of I found inspiring is the need to really look for solutions and actions that prepare people in advance of a shock. And also we talked a little bit about the challenges of getting the right evidence and generate that evidence in advance, because quite often for people you might not quite know where the next shock is going to be and when, of course, but also sometimes the perceived priority of people to engage in that type of evidence generation and discussions about how to prepare for shocks may be very different. Of course, after a shock, everything changes, and then you've got a very different situation. But really, I think in our community we should focus on how to work on the preparedness stage and organize engagement around that.
Thank you. Perfect. Sure. And Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, Herman really summarized it very well. I guess, professors are good at summarizing things, so you got me covered. I appreciate that. Well, let me just build on that. One of the things that I heard, especially this morning, is this idea of the fact that we have to be inclusive of those communities. And somebody observed on our table that one thing that is missing in this forum, in the sessions that we are, is the communities themselves, the farmers themselves, the people we're trying to help. And that struck me as really being foundational as we go forward. It's really, for those of you who are experts, remember, my job is to use the output that you give us, right? We need to make sure that those communities are involved, that we can really include them in the conversation, because it's very important. And that goes to that principle of the thing we heard this morning from Nate about HRS. People at the core, the heart of the whole thing. And I will add, it's people and communities that are at the core of these things. And so as we go forward, I hope you guys will give us answers that will really address some of those things. And then another point was this idea of, we know we have to have data. But it's not just only about data. Is that data being not just pertinent, but something that will enable us to build stories that you can tell? Because at the end of the day, the human face or the human impact is going to be critical for everything we do. And so one idea that I got from our table is this idea of regular and recurrent data, meaning we have to be prepared to refresh the data. Just because you have one data point today is not all of it. You need to refresh it. Let me give you an example. All the data we had before COVID went through the windows, right? So if you think we're done, we're not done. So this idea of continuous improvement, like they say in Japanese, Kaizen, has to be integrated in this journey. And with human beings, the psychology of everything changes depending on the circumstance. Your circumstance determines how you react, right? We need to make sure that we understand those things. Why am I saying these things? For selfish reasons. If you look at us, I keep telling you, the only reason we're involved in this is selfish. It's about an enduring supply chain. But at the same time, you need to coexist. And so we're also making an impact in those communities that count. So as you give us ideas, I want to make sure we're addressing all these diverse communities, multi, type of duplicity of ideas is really important. I don't think, if you ask me, the only opinion I have is that one idea will never be enough to address the disparate communities that we deal with. So if you have that, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And yes, I just want to sort of pile on there that idea of learning from what we're doing in these type of disaster reliefs, attending to shock. This is something that USAID is taking very seriously. We're working right now on an evaluation that will be looking at how we reacted, at least on the side of the Resilience and Food Security Bureau, how we reacted to COVID and some of the other shock stressors from the last 2 years. So we have some questions prepared, as I mentioned, but I want to give the mic to the people here in the room. So if you have a question or a comment or, anything, 1 second until the mic gets to you. Thank you. And maybe tell us your name, where you coming from, what your favorite color is, any of those.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name's Anna Taylor. I work here in Cape Town at the University of Cape Town, doing research on climate adaptation. And I just wanted to pick up on the point about inclusiveness in co-creation, which is very central to the work that we're doing. But the point that you made about, where are the community members, where are the farmers, for example, in this conversation, and just ask a question around ideas around innovating how we facilitate that inclusion, because we come up against this question a lot. Where are, the people closest to where the action is, in a way? And I think part of the answer for them not being here is because they're not paid to talk, or they're not paid to collect data. Their livelihood is based on producing whatever they produce. So yes, we can, buy a flight and bring them to a workshop or whatever, but that's not a sustainable mechanism for engaging, enabling them to be part of these co-creation processes. And so I'm always struck by, we end up saying this often, but there's this big divide between people who get a salary that enables them to come and commit time to being part of these co-creation processes. But there are many people who, that money they need to sustain themselves doesn't cover time to co-create. And so I'm just interested in the room to hear about whether anybody, and then, often, like, for example, in a research process, that becomes an ethical complication, because often it's not desirable to pay for people's participation, because then it becomes self-selecting for the wrong reasons. So I understand there are many reasons why that ends up being perpetuated, but I think that's a real stumbling block to inclusion in co-creation. And so I was just interested whether anybody in the organizations that you work in have found innovative mechanisms. Of course, what we try to do is then take the workshop to where people are, not ask them to take too much time out of their livelihood activity to be part of it. But all of those are constraints on inclusion. So how do we get over that divide, so to speak?
So before we go around to get ideas, let me just give you an instance that motivated me. And this is why I'm a big champion of finding a way to include those, what I call hidden voices. So at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last year, one of the things I would tell you, if you talk to people that have been going to COP for some time, that came out of that climate conference was the inclusion of those hidden voices. So they made a deliberate effort. You don't need to bring everybody. They made a deliberate effort to bring people from the Amazon, to bring the youth. You talk about the youth. And to be honest with you, I was really enriched by going to sessions to hear these young people that are really struggling to start with brilliant ideas. And that was one. And then people from the Amazon And with translators, I assume the translators were translating it quite properly because I was equally motivated. Their ideas are simple and actionable. That's how I would describe it. And oftentimes, because some of us, we want to, how do I put it? We want to be a little more on the theoretical side. We lose that simplicity that comes from really understanding what matters on the ground. And so I would tell you, I'm hoping that COP28 in Dubai this year will bring that type of thing. There was rich value, but that's something that was missing. And everybody I talked to after COP highlighted some of that. Obviously, you can't go to everything. But I was just fortunate to see some of that. There is a way to include them. So to your point about somebody that is not making enough money and you ask them to come here, it's not going to work. But that's where we come in, with grants and with help. If we feel it's a critical stakeholder, USAID in particular will be amenable to really bring in some of them because it's about ideas. It's not about position or anything. And as I say, I think they're critically important to my own well-being. They actually pay me. Does that make sense? That's why we need to include them.
Thank you for that. Want to see if there are any perspectives in the room. And while we get the mic, Herm, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just to confirm that, I really like the point that you're raising. I think we haven't found a solution to do that. I would probably say, let's also not overemphasize that the only solutions will emerge from global fora, whether it's COP or whether it's conferences like this. So I think the more we can organize decentrally and locally, the more easy it becomes to kind of change our ways of interacting and engaging different communities and stakeholders. But yeah, I can get started on a long story about power in these type of multi-stakeholder collaborative processes. Won't do that right now because I want to listen to your stories. And there's also, maybe later on I can share some practical examples of how I've seen, we always talk about leveling the playing field, and we know that the playing field isn't level. But there are ways how you can make it slightly less skewed. And that's, at the moment, the best that I've been able to think about how to do it and do it deliberately, because I know that as we're sitting here, we're coming from a position of privilege, and it just creates all these biases, conscious or unconscious, that we somehow need to grapple with. And being aware of those, that's the first thing. So apart from structure of how you organize workshops and engagement, it's also about mindset and doing the inner work about how to listen to other people and understand their perspectives.
Awesome, thank you. And we have one more comment or question in the room. And a reminder to tell us your name and maybe where you're working.
My name is Luis Artur. I'm from Mozambique. I work for Eduardo Mondlane University in Mozambique. Well, I just want to share with you one of those experiences that we had in engaging local communities in co-creation processes. And I think the one of the key challenges that we face is the whole mindset that existed along different chains of decision making. I think the current mindset is not to a point that you can start a process from below. Why I'm saying that is because
I'm sorry. Can we ask you to speak a little bit closer for
okay,
people
thank you.
online? Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, all the mindset across different institutions and levels, they are created in such a way that do not facilitate the co-creation process for local communities. Why? So I'm saying a lot of our indicators are really short-term. Like, we have to have results in 2 years or less than that. And you have to go to more extractive process rather than really engaging processes. When we started a process of co-creation, one of the key barriers that we got was even at local level, like, you are taking too long just to listen to the people when you are really starting the intervention, you see. So people want the quick results and the quick winners, and they're not really much interested in the process, in the engaging process itself. I just want to come to an example. Like, when we started with these, gatekeepers at community, provincial, national level, they assumed they knew already what local community they wanted. And that was a process of co-creation, speaking to local people, what are really the needs and what can really sustain them. It's a process of linking climate change and social protection mechanisms. You say the gatekeeper, they wanted, we know we need, local people want cows, they want water, they want this and that. And actually, when we discuss local community, we're really very much appreciating small things like chicken, because they can sustain these. They need different things, but the point that they wanted a quick result and the quick wins, at least at different higher levels, do not allow you really to go into really those processes of engagement, etc. And so I think we need time and indicators that allow us to really give space for the long-term engagements and long-term process, not looking only at numbers and quick wins that is current context takes us.
So thank you for that. Yes, we have another comment question here in the room.
Thank you. My name is Hal Carey. I'm with USAID in DRC, Kinshasa. I've worked about a decade now with USAID, and I think some of the things that I observe in how do we amplify voices from individuals and the roots level, it's difficult when you have a behemoth like USAID to steer the ship and be responsive to listening to local voices, because it takes so much effort. And we're so short-staffed, and we have a lot of competing pressures. But I kind of like to look at it from three different levels. When we're looking at a systems level, we work with business associations as a proxy to bring voices up through their association to either a subnational or like an umbrella organization for whether it's small businesses or agriculture or what have you. Then we also work at the community level, and there's an interesting mechanism that we have called Local Works. And the beauty of it is most of the time donor funding is earmarked or tagged to something specific, whether it's agriculture, health, environment. Local Works gives you the flexibility to not have to worry about that. And we send teams of our local national hires out to have conversations with youth primarily. And so that removes the foreigner aspect and empowers our Congolese or Timorese or Tanzanian colleagues to go and have conversations with different youth groups and in different settings to bring out voices from women's groups, from marginalized groups, from joint men and women's groups. And they identify the problem, and they say, these are the different things that we may want to pursue solutions to. And our team helps them evolve those ideas into something that we can get behind. And we don't worry about measuring the result at that point. We just want to identify some possibilities. And then once these get refined enough, we can launch a finite small activity with them. It takes a lot of legwork, but there's a lot of value in that. And then if I look at the individual level, the way that we empower voices and really drive local solutions to local issues is with innovative finance tools a lot of times, because I'm in the economic growth side. So I'm thinking mostly of enterprise establishment and growth, and how can we support those pre-startup and startup enterprises, nascent enterprises, and help them overcome initial entry into the economy and then grow and thrive and hopefully eventually start hiring people. I mean, that's where you generate real change.
Can you just stay with you for a minute?
Sure.
You were involved with the East Timor project.
I was.
Exactly. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's at the crux of what you are trying to do. Because sometimes we dwell with all these concepts, but this is a more pragmatic way of explaining it. Why don't you do that? Because I think this audience will benefit from it and the sustained nature, because you involve the community and what they can do. Go ahead.
You're talking about from the coffee cooperative during the conflict era?
Yes, the globes and all those things that happened. East Timor those things that happened when East Timor opened up. Remember? That's a good example. Go ahead.
So for those of you who don't know anything about East Timor, a lot of people don't. It's a small island nation on the eastern end of Indonesia. that suffered a 25-year-long civil war that saw half of their population die through violence and starvation. It was invaded by Indonesia when the Portuguese pulled out. And one way that the global community helped them survive this situation was to build economic channels where they would be able to meet their basic needs and fund a resistance movement. USAID got behind that by helping organize, get individuals into a cooperative based around cash crops, primarily herbs and spices, I should say, and coffee. And over time, when the resistance movement was finally able to succeed, this organization of individuals was poised to thrive and started negotiating agreements directly with global buyers such as McCormick and eventually Starbucks, and their association grew. And it's the individuals are the governance structure, and they decide how their shares are going to be distributed amongst each other, and how some of the proceeds are also going to fund common benefits, such as a healthcare system for their membership that goes a little bit further than what the actual local government can provide. And in this way, it's become the single largest exporter of the nation through this initial effort to work with small groups to help overcome very significant issues. Is that, or would you add something else to that?
That's a great story of how you build resilience in a community that was completely devastated, and bringing in the private sector, and USAID was in the middle of it, facilitating it. But more importantly, this is what I said, all the crop they were growing, they couldn't do that because of the war and the devastation. But they knew what their soil could produce. It's very important. I couldn't do that. You couldn't do that with as much behemoth the USAID is. But these people brought the information, and all we did was catalyze it with USAID support and all those things. And today's history, they're thriving.
We just helped with the governance and then connecting them to companies.
All right, thanks for that experience. And I think we had one more comment or question over here in the room, and then that's going to be the last one until we go to some of the guided questions we had here, because I really want to get through them as well.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. Is it still morning? Good afternoon. My name is Edward. I'm from Kenya, representing a consultancy firm called Ecocentric. Ecocentric works on Jeff-funded campaigns. And I was actually talking about inclusion and representation. And I wanted to give an example of something we did last year that superseded the client's expectations. So I work with, the Jeff campaign we work on is called Planet Gold. So I'm one of the very few participants here who actually works on a very different industry, which is small-scale mining, artisanal and small-scale mining. And what we did with when the Planet Gold team were coming to Kenya, so Planet Gold was born from the Minamata Convention, which is the eradication and the elimination of mercury use in anthropogenic practices, so within people who are using it to mine and so on and so forth. Planet Gold has 13 different projects happening around the world. So they were holding their annual program meeting in Nairobi, Kenya last year. And we were asked to put together the conference and prepare for that. So during that preparation, me and my team came up and said, what can we do that would be different, that would be more impactful? And we did 3 different things that at the end was really well received by the client. The one thing we did is we moved the conference from the big cities closer to where the actual people who were impacted were. And that was a huge plus for, bringing content to the program meeting. The second thing that we did as well, was we invited the actual small scale miners to attend the meeting. And the other third thing that we did is we spent a day. We didn't just spend the whole 5 days in a conference. We spent 1 day in the field, where we took the entire delegation to the field to see what their money, where their money is going, and what impact their money has on the ground, and how we are trying to eliminate mercury. And out of that meeting, something happened that was, blew everyone's mind. Is that we had what we planned our, a Chatham House sort of a conference where everybody who was involved in the meeting just sat and listened, and we gave opportunity to the small scale miners to speak, and we gave opportunity to the large scale mining companies involved also to speak. And the government listened, and the planners also listened. And at that meeting, we saw two groups that have been in conflict address their issues, understand one another, and stand up and shake hands and agree to move together, in working together. And it was a huge step for two groups that have been in conflict for a long time. And what we learned is that representation is very, very powerful. It's critical to have the people who you are trying to plan for, to build resilience for, in the room, explaining to you what they need and their barriers to their progress. And at the end of it, the Jeff team, funders, and the donors stood up and said, this has to be one of the best annual program meetings that they've had in a really long time, and now want to implement that sort of a structure for future conferences that they do. And that's just a small story on how representation and inclusion can be impactful. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful to hear. After the Fail Fest yesterday, some of the stories of things that really worked. So we're gonna give it last one, and then I'll move on to, and I don't know if Herman, you had anything to.
Thank you very much. And yes, I just wanted to build up on this issue of building trust and relationship, that we also had examples of suppliers clubs in Mozambique. Sorry, I didn't present myself. I'm from USAID Mozambique. Of building suppliers clubs that rely basically on trust and relationship with smallholder farmers to build their systems. And what we have realized is that after 1 or 2 cycles of supplying to the same suppliers, same farmers, these farmers will produce and have reliable markets where they get the inputs and everything. And then whenever there was a shock or crisis that came, they were more prepared to outstand that shock. So the resilience was built just because of that. The tricky part is, how do we measure that trust and the relationship building when we want to present the results to USAID? So that was one of the challenge. The second point I wanted to bring here is about addressing youth and women empowerment, which we are trying to do. We know it's 2 groups that have normally difficulties in entering the system. So we made targeted assistance where we provide grants, small grants for them. And because they are startups, they are new businesses, no one wants to finance. So it's a seed capital that they can then go to financial institutes for matching grants or finance, I would say. And then we help them through co-creation as well. So that allows them to be prepared to enter the market. And with that, we ensure inclusion. Just wanted to bring these 2 points. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I see you writing some stuff over here, Herman. You want to respond or comment?
Yeah, since we're still on the topic of how to organize these co-creation processes, there's maybe listening to the stories, that there's one story came to mind of something that I experienced in an evaluation that I did, where I was really keen, like in many of the stories, to find out how were people included in this process or not. Were they invited or were they consulted? How did that work? And a lot of the stories are indeed also about ways how you can engage with communities. But one comment from an Ethiopian farmer kind of stuck in my mind, who at the moment said, yeah, we were consulted, but afterwards we didn't hear anything. So, we've stopped being interested in being consulted because we don't know. Nobody's closing the loop. Nobody's giving us any feedback. It's just also a warning. Maybe better to have a limited engagement process, but then see it through well, and also make clear your expectations on how people are actually going to be involved in a process. And also just be, what's the word in English? Just be a nice person. If somebody offers you their time, it's very reasonable for them to get feedback on what you did with their time and with their input. That's also just being a nice person. I think maybe that's not a very hard criterion, but you probably get what I mean, right? Yeah. So I wrote a book about that a couple of years ago with some colleagues. It's called the MSP Guide, about how to design and facilitate multi-stakeholder partnerships. It has 7 principles on how you do this type of stuff. And one of them is working with complexity and also analyze kind of the system that you're trying to work with. And doing that first as one of those 7 principles. These others are about working with power, working with conflicts, communication, learning, and all that stuff. But analyzing the complex situation that you're in may also help you to maybe find out who are the stakeholders that perhaps I don't need to engage, because sometimes you just may want to focus on the ones that actually matter instead of just involving everybody. Because of course, if we're trying to be inclusive, sometimes we also make the mistake of trying to include too many people, and then you get very messy processes that may not lead anywhere, and you're also wasting other people's time. So there's also a balance there that you need to strike.
So thank you for that. I am seeing, I mean, it's been about 50 minutes that we've been in here. I'm not a big proponent of these really long meetings. So I was thinking that maybe, since it's the 50-minute mark, we stand up for a second, all of us. I'll invite you for like 30 seconds to stand up. These chairs are brutal, so I'm also doing it for myself. We stand up if you guys are feeling a little bit more risque. You move around a little bit, do a dance, whatever it is. We could also run outside and get some coffee, but if I've memorized all your faces. If I don't see you back here in 2 minutes, I'm going to be very upset. Talk later. And then we sit back down, continue with the discussion, because we're at a pivotal point. Not really. You said you memorized the bases. I did. I didn't promise to hunt down people, though. We gotta get Michael. Right, awesome. We have everyone back in the room. So let's go ahead and get started again. I don't want to have to rely on the like raising of the hand thing. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking that time and being back, actually. So we were just discussing how we have so many great contributors here in the room. So again, encourage you guys to speak up, tell your thoughts, respond to some of the questions that are coming from your other colleagues. But I thought that for this sort of second part, we could start off with what the actual theme of this is, which is investing in systems that reduce risk, right? So thinking of how what we've been trying to do here is bring the public sector, the private sector, academia together to really understand how we bring those investments into the system, right? How do we bring them? How do we get together? What are the sort of next steps or things that we heard here that strike us as the ways forward, as what we need to be doing in order to continue to improve this, the way the funds are like flowing into the system. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts up here with me, or if we want to like leave it up. You have anything? I mean, it's other people.
Well, very short. And this is coming from a conversation that we had this morning in an earlier session. Just before we had our little coffee break, we talked a lot about co-creation and processes in the community. But also, if you look at how data is being collected and aggregated across different sectors in the resilience space, I think there's still, a lot of the logical practice of people collecting data is to sit on those data, either because it's commercial or either because they're academic and people want to, first analyze the data and publish it in their journal and then release the data sets. So I think yesterday, Michael, from your failure story yesterday evening, I recalled that you also mentioned something about that McCormick, together with a couple of other companies, decided to move a certain piece of work into the pre-competitive space rather than doing so. So there's if I think about what are next actions in terms of investment, I would say, if there's some effort that can be done to release some of those data sets and make sure that more people can actually use them, that might, we don't have the time to really use the normal processes where we exchange the results of our research years afterwards and so on. So any suggestions on what type of platforms we could propose for that, would really be welcome. That's not my field of work really, but I sense that there's really an urgent need for that.
Yeah, so any ideas on how we sort of make it available to everyone, like the type of data and evidence that we're collecting? Any experiences from you guys from the field or anything that's happened in your organizations that maybe have worked or not worked that we can learn from? 1 second for the mic, for people online. 1 second. There you go.
I wish I could say that.
Your name and
Okay.
organization,
Yes.
please.
Kunal Parekh. I am from Catalyst Management Services that is operating for the last 25 years in 25 countries in Global South, primarily on the health, livelihood, and resilience. And I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Community Action Collab. That's a platform of 370 organizations, both civil sector, not-for-profits, as well as thematic domain providers, and private sector, along with a few government and academic institutions to provide resilience. I don't think I can say that we have the experience, but we have an inspiration, and I thought I'll share with that. First of all, I think, I've the last 20 years, 10 years I've spent in corporate sector and 10 years in development sector. And I'm at that intersection. So while I do see, McCormick able to inspire many more corporates to do what you're doing, I see the first thing is in development sector itself. organizations who has the same intention, we are not sharing data. And the starting point could be USAID across the programs, even in India, even in all other places. There is work going on. There is a lot of data reporting that's happening. If we had that as a platform, that would be a great starting point to avoid duplication of resources. And we don't have really the luxury of time and resources as far as climate change is concerned. And from that angle, what we are, Catalyst Management Services is looking at is just a starting point. We give social protection services to the communities. So they are providing us information for their ability that the government schemes are able to reach the unreached. That being the starting point, and they do need loans. Most of them need short-term loans, and they're paying at a very high interest rate. With that, we are trying to create a data architecture that with that starting point, we have the community level data, which the users would be interested in giving, but now we put the health out indicators as well as the livelihood profiles of them, which data sets through analysis is now open for our network, for policy advocacy, for investments in social businesses. So that's something that we have a vision for next 2 years that we and supported by an extremely good tech-based platform, but all in inspiration format.
Thank you for that. I'm actually going to go ahead. I see some hands in the room very quickly. Put somebody on the spot. Michael, if you can stand up for a second. Michael Coons, my colleague from USAID, actually leads a site called Resilience Links that I think could be a good platform or starting point to put all these types of data. It's an excellent place for practitioners for resilience to meet. It's actually, it has a room for blogs. They do some theme months every 2 months. I think it's happening where webinars also occur. I don't want to be like doing this huge promotion for it, but definitely see his face. Come look for him later. I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think it's a good starting point, as you guys are mentioning. And since we're being brought here in part by USAID with other implementing partners, it could be a good place for us to start with that.
Yeah, thanks, Alejo. Thanks for nothing more to add. You just promoted Resilience Links brilliantly for us. So thanks. But I think it is this. It's the inspiration is to share the evidence and share the stories. And really, I think that is a good starting point. And I look forward to following up with you and others on opportunities to do that. And I do think what I do see is through that experience of designing and building up Resilience Links with a host of leadership from the resilience community. And we invite you all to participate in that and make that Resilience Links a richer platform. But what I do see as opportunities is plethora of evidence that does exist. The question is, how do we organize it, put it together, and so that it can have the objectives that we all have. We have different objectives, right? The communities have an incredible, diverse set of objectives. Policymakers have another set of objectives. The private sector has objectives that are related to profit, right? And we have to recognize that. So we have to be able to kind of make this a platform that can work for everybody, but at the same time have the kind of concrete, tangible uses. So yeah, we're looking forward. This is just the beginning of our learning journey and discussion. So yeah, thanks a lot.
So reducing duplication of efforts. We have a lot of hands.
How raw is the evidence that you make available? Is it all processed into stories already, or is it some of the fundamental data behind
It
depends on you.
Stories and yeah, absolutely. And so we can look at ways to add a data component, and we want to talk to you about that and look at the ways to do that. Another thing is there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of reports, there's a lot of kind of like just mainline takeaways from reports and stories. Maybe one thing that folks have talked about is how do we pull that all together, and make a larger story and help direct the different diverse groups within the resilience community utilize that information better.
And just to add that before we hand it off again, I mean, it really depends on you guys, on the users. Like it is community driven, so it's the community who ultimately puts those things up there for everyone to see. So if you want more of that raw data, if that's what's interesting, maybe we can start that conversation of how we do that. But it's definitely something that's available. Can we pass it? Yeah.
Just
It's
it's
resi-
resilience links. Yeah. I just wanted to add, if you guys can't get a hold of Michael because he's very important, very busy all the time. I do genuinely mean that though. You can also find myself, I'm Hallie Heinzen, or our colleague Bobby Hartwell. And we can also help get you linked in onto Resilience Links. We help resiliencelinks.org. Okay, yeah. But we help manage some of that. So if you can't get a hold of Michael, feel free to find one of us.
And I think we can pass the mic right here.
Okay, hi, my name is Val Charlton. I'm based in Cape Town, a company called Landworks. And in essence, I work at the community-based fire management level. But I just want to support what's being said here. And the sector that I've been working with, because it's a fire issue, sector I've been working with for a very long time is the insurance sector. And it's taken us 20 years to get to a point where the insurance sector very protective of their data. Because there's obviously liabilities, there's competition, etc. And only now are they starting to share that. But for me, that's such an important link to where we have to go in developing new insurance products that are perhaps from a developmental point of view. And I think that's a bigger conversation that somehow needs to happen. We've tried to start it at a national and international point of view, led by the insurance sector in South Africa. They've now established a climate and disaster risk fund, which they're hoping to get money in from the insurance sector to work in the developmental sector. So I was just saying this is an ongoing process, but this is so important. I just support what you're saying around because the data that sits in that insurance data bank is not necessarily accurate. And I think that's really one of the most important points is that it's not modified by reality in a way. It's a certain section. It's a section that can afford to be insured rather than the people that are non-insurable, which is the developmental sector that we're working on.
Thank you. And I think we can pass it. Were you raising your hand earlier? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Joseph Badebokila. I'm a CDCAN project manager in Central and West Africa. But I will share some, not an experience, but the support I'm providing to a young entrepreneur who he has aimed to address the most important need communities are facing. So communities are divided by three groups: community of indigenous people, farmers, and young entrepreneurs. So what we see I think it's common in every country, that the rate of poverty is very high in a far community with those who live in very far from the cities. They don't access to funding, for example. And what's happened that they cannot afford buying a sack of seed, or they don't have money to prepare the land for plantation. So the project is about creating a green fintech, which will address the possibility of having a loan of $20 or $50, not a lot of money, in fact. So how? And the plan is to use a mobile phone for that. You can get everybody in Congo, let's say in Africa, have access, have a mobile phone, if it's a simple phone or a smartphone. So the system will be like that. Okay, you create an account. So there is a very simple onboarding system. Okay, because when you buy a phone, or you buy a SIM card, you provide your ID. So in that community, they don't have ID, but they do have. So to get a loan, you don't need to show anything. You just need to come with two persons in your vicinity who can testify who you are and how serious you are. So the idea is to provide a small loan, and every loan will be attached with an insurance. It's an index-based insurance, a parametric insurance. Why I was saying that? Because if someone gets a loan to, let's say, to plant peanuts, and let's say we face flooding or drought, you won't have a high, your yield will be damaged. So the insurance will prevent the farmer or the young boy for running bankruptcy. You know, he will get money for something else. So the most need we are is how to get accurate data so the insurance can be can function very well. We already have a group of data provided by the mobile phone companies. So we know where the network is okay and how we can locate someone in case of, he ran away with the money. And what can be good for this project is, for example, okay, Dr. Michael is there. He want to produce more paper. How to get paper? You can use this possibility. We fund the farmers, we give them credits, if they can buy seeds, because they know that someone will buy the production, So the money will go to them. Then when they are paid, we can reimburse easily. And all this system will be based on mobile phone. We can get money in cash on local grocery, or we can keep it on the wallet, the mobile money wallet. So it's something we are just working on now. And the most important thing that we want is how to make it efficient, and how to make it replicable. Because the needs could be, or I'm quite sure it's everywhere in every country. So for now, God willing, we might start to operating with that entrepreneur by next year, January. So, yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, yes, we have one more, and then we'll take it to a question for guidance. Yes.
Great. Just one comment I wanted to make. USAID, this is in response to the data that's available. USAID, we do have an open data that is publicly available, and it's constructed in a way that enables data to be fully discoverable. So we do have a program, the Project Open Data, that you may be interested in looking into. It's part of a larger trend that is going with other multilateral donors to make that information, that data available. So I can give you an ADS reference, which is our automated directive system, which may be too much detail, but if you look at ADS 579.6, I would recommend that you can look into that a little bit more to see if the data would suffice to your information. It is scrubbed for PII, but there are set policies and people who are collecting large amounts of data to be able to allow those data sets to be more broadly available.
And thank you for that. There's a library of resources that will be available or is already available for this forum. And so we're going to make sure that both of those things are there linked so that it's easier to find. But for now, memorize that number that was given. We have another comment.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Daniel Deng, and I work for a foundation called One Project. It's a social impact firm. But I'm going to share an experience from a previous incarnation, which was in South Sudan, where I was working as first the chief of party for the monitoring, evaluation, and support project of USAID. And at that time, USAID launched, in collaboration with other donors, a very ambitious project called the Partnership for Recovery and Resilience. And this was a collaboration of 14 donor agencies, 17 UN agencies, and the NGO Forum, which had, I think, 150 plus NGOs. And the idea was co-location, coordination and collaboration across this, right, interagency, multi-donor in area-based programming for resilience, okay? And we were charged with setting up the backbone support, which included facilitating the data collection and information sharing and knowledge co-creation across this platform. And that really produced some really interesting insights, good, bad, and ugly. The good things that we were able to accomplish were that we facilitated the formation of a joint Assessment, Measurement, and Monitoring Group, what they call the JMG. And they did try to unify their indicators and data collection processes and do a whole lot of sharing. And we also managed to create a culture which tried to transform kind of the bottom-up flow of data and the top-down flow of decisions, which was actually how what I call the data value chain works in South Sudan, to a more circulative, community-based sense-making approach. And we did it through implementing rapid feedback loops, where the data collected was first and foremost fed back to the community through local governance structures in village sense-making formats. And two things came out of that. One was local resilience action plans, where the communities themselves would commit to their priorities and what they could leverage internally from within the community without even any external support, which was very cool. And we did a development evaluation that showed there's a lot of agency that can be leveraged and mobilized when the community is well organized and motivated. And secondly, the identification of convergence points, where the community then approaches the implementing partners and the donors saying, look, this is where we'd like you to target your resources collaboratively. Both of those were very powerful. Also, what we called faces of resilience, which were actually stories that the communities told themselves by identifying members within the community who they felt exemplified resilience. And they were put in video products that told the stories in simple forms, and we shared these annually with in an annual learning forum. So these were like really cool, I think, powerful things that were lessons and examples of success in the project. At the same time, I also saw that there's a culture and a structure that promotes competition, you know, and the agencies don't like to share information. They're not incentivized to share information. They recognize the power and value of that information, and they're competing with one another for resources. And unless the donors are incredibly committed to re-incentivizing or creating a new set of incentives, then those structural constraints to what we're talking about are going to continue. And so I think the donors at a coordination level have a very big role to play in changing the playing field around this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. And with the applause, I also saw both of these guys have been taking some notes. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to maybe react. Michael, do you have?
Sure, I really like that. This idea of having the organization, I mean, the way you coordinated it and organize it, you have, you know, to use your word, you have a bottom-up approach and decision going from up and down. And that goes to what Herman was alluding to in terms of making sure that you share the information to the people. You collect this information from them. Let them know what the input is leading to, what kind of decision is happening there. And I agree with you, Herman. It's good to be nice, because if you carry that along, you can feel free to share things without minding. One thing I'll tell you is I've seen that work as well. And in the failure that we had, that I shared yesterday, you noticed that it was like a dead end. We thought we did a great job, and this thing came boom in your face. It was a failure because you missed the most important thing. Where have you been successful with only 5%? Nowhere. Definitely not on the climate journey. But now, rethinking it and accepting the fact that we failed, to include those, right? We had what I call mission to really search our minds and see why we failed. And we understood that. And then we found out, yeah, we can make that claim now for the scope 3. But the problem is you can't afford to finance it, because we're talking about financing here. So now we have a pathway. We have started with convening 3 companies, McCormick, PepsiCo, and Mars. And as I said, Mars is our competitor in certain areas. This is a pre-competitive space. And so now we created those 3 as a convening members, and then we started financing the work for the suppliers selflessly, you know. And we started financing it, and today we have 17 CPG companies that are really doing the thing. So what I'm saying is, being nice sometimes can get you a lot of, partners. And I don't see us building what I call sustained resilience that is able to resist shocks that we haven't even imagined if we can't partner with others to execute. And that's really the moral of the story that you told, and I'm really glad to hear that. That's why you get the applause.
Thank you. Any thoughts?
Oh, I just thank you, Daniel, for sharing that story. That's really a very rich story because it includes a lot of work that was done on the data kind of side of things. But you also mentioned, a lot of the sense making that you did together with all the agencies and stakeholders involved, and so on. So it's a really great combination, I think, of quant and qual coming together. And it probably has been a hard journey to get to that stage, but it's really important that you kept on thinking about the terms downward and upward accountability. Quite often in our projects, the data goes up because the accountability is always going up to whoever funds. But there's also something called downward accountability, and that's not only kind of an ethical issue, but it's also pragmatic, I would say, because if you share data or if you involve other people in sense making of whatever is emerging from your projects and whether we're actually building resilience or not, that also creates a lot of ownership and brings in new ideas and innovations from communities or from different stakeholders, different than the usual suspects. And that can only enrich your programming cycle, I would say. So not only upward but also downward accountability. I'm actually curious, to because you asked a question to us about what's emerging in terms of actions or things in the for investment that you want to end up this session with. I was just curious to ask you about what some of your impressions are. It's easy to ask the question, but why don't you?
Thank you for putting on the spot. So one of the reasons they put me here is because I really don't have the capacity to make any commitments here. So they're just letting me ask the questions for that reason. So that's a very, political way of saying this is an open question. One of the reasons why we brought Dean Esposito and Mia Beers, who are the both sort of heads of our bureau, the bureau in which the Center for Resilience lives, is because we want them to really understand how implementing partners, people that are on the ground, organizations that are doing research are really seeing resilience work, how investments are moving, and we want them to take decisions over that. So I would stay tuned really for what they're going to be saying after this. We've had discussions. We had dinner with them yesterday, and they seem to be very interested in what's coming. So again, I don't have any specific things that I can speak to, but it's something that both the Center for Resilience and our bureau in USAID widely are very committed to, and in fact, a lot of investment has come in the last couple of years for resilience. I'm not sure if Michael, you want to add there?
Yeah, no, great, Alejo. That's right on target. I think, what I said, what we're really excited about is, the importance of this discussion is just to have, reflective time, because what we're hearing from you all now is going to go into a synthesis report. And that synthesis report is really meant to be actionable. So we want to take these ideas, we've heard about the open data, how are we going to do that? And we're going to follow up with you. We're going to follow up with you all to find, kind of prioritize and find out how we can continue this journey working together. Now, we've all, I think, established very clearly what perhaps we already knew in many regards, is that this is a very diverse group. So the challenge will be to have key takeaways and identify kind of pathways forward from the different areas and groups, and then we'll go on that journey and see, come back together in a year, 2 years, and see how we go. In the meantime, along that journey, we want to be collaborating. So this is a really important kind of concluding session, and as all the other sessions, and we're really excited to see that synthesis report, get your input on it, and share it with you when it's ready too, and work to continue working together.
Yeah, and that's also part of the other thing that I think is going to be very important. This is I think it's the second iteration of this sort of forum. The idea is for us to continue the conversation, and when we meet next year, we all come back, and maybe I'll be better able to respond to this question with like concrete things that have happened. But Michael, you had something else that you heard from Dina on your conversation this morning.
Yeah, so really, what I wanted to share this because I was personally touched that Dina approached me this morning and said, you know, she's hoping that some of these things we're talking about here is not something we're going to do and then it's all over. She believes, this is my synthesis, to use that word, of her, what she was trying to communicate, in the power of follow-up. So, and Michael is in the middle of it. So we're going to try and make sure we're following up very soon, to even before COP, so that we have something that we can share. I think that's really how people hearing all these things are going to hold all of us accountable, me included. Because if not, this will be an exercise in futility, and I don't want to do it next year. Thank you.
Okay, so we have about 3 more minutes, and I don't like going over in any of my facilitated meetings. I would like us to, you know, in like the spirit of learning that we've had in these last 2 days, I want to hear from everyone, like fire, like really quickly, what is that one thing that you sort of are leaving this forum with? It can be like 2 words, don't make it too long, but like you guys can even like yell it out. I want to hear what are the most important things that we heard from today's session. What comes back, like what are you going to be sharing with your boss or with your other colleagues that you learned here? Any
Leaving
thoughts?
with a
Quickly?
giant stack of business cards.
Yes. Having Resilience Link as a QR code, yes. Being nice, I got being nice.
Thanks. Need for cooperation and sharing information.
Pass on the mic.
Open data.
Inclusion.
Better narrative. Co-creation.
If things are repeated, then that means like they're more powerful, so.
Adaptation and transformation.
Sharing information.
Be specific.
Equity.
Hearing the voice of the community.
Learn from your failures.
That win-win isn't enough. It should be win, 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 win.
Inclusivity.
Feedback to communities.
Let's create a working group for open data for resilience right here.
Decolonize climate action.
Collaboration.
To repeat, cross-agency information platforms.
We gotta go really fast now. It's a minute left, guys, on this side.
I would say linking community-based production along with corporate governance to global markets is not only possible, but extremely powerful.
I believe added to not recreating the wheel, but like building on that wheel, building that car. Yeah.
I think in pursuit of open data, it's being vulnerable to sharing that data, knowing what you get back. You may not know what you're getting back, and then building that trust, because it all centers around a trusting relationship around how the data is used.
Inclusivity and representation.
Community-led co-creation.
I'm going to break the rules. I'm really sorry, but I'm still struggling, or I'm still thinking about the trade-off between the need for collaboration and co-creation and speed in how we do things quickly. And I'm still having a fight in my head about that.
We can have a discussion about that. Yes.
Transformative changes.
All right, awesome. Well, with that, I think we'll conclude. I wanted to thank Michael and Herman. We really asked them like last minute, to do this because we wanted to get some learning of what happened in the last 2 days to be able to inform the questions and things we wanted to talk about. So thank you. A round of applause for them and for you guys because you were also pivotal in like the participation here. And lunch has started. I'm sorry I took a minute from you guys.